Ah, aliens. Good old xenomorphs. Who doesn't love them? I know I do, and I've been looking forward to getting my hands on Fireteam Elite 2 for a while now. I've never played the first one, but it strikes me as one of those games with a pretty dedicated fanbase that seemed like they were really excited for the sequel. And with all the good horde shooters coming out recently, I was hopeful for another entry that pushes the entire genre forward like Far Far West earlier this year. But now that I've gotten my hands on it, I don't know. I spent the first 2 days after release playing, and it's not the worst game I've ever played. I do think there is some good stuff going on here, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed with the amount of technical issues, bugs, and even game design decisions that I don't agree with. I don't think it's unplayable slop or anything, but it's competing with some really good games like Space Marines 2, Helldivers 2, or my dear sweet Darktide. The game launched at $50 for the cheapest edition, which is steep, so it really needed to bring something special to the table, and I just don't think it did. But like I said, it's not all bad. There's actually a few things going on that I do like. So, let's take a look at the game in the format that I felt was the most appropriate. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now first things first, this is a horde shooter. That means you get your buddies, you pick your classes, and you have fun just killing enemies. Fireteam Elite 2 does offer that. And I don't think anyone would disagree that the build crafting is a high point for this game. You have access to 5 unique classes, plus a 6th called Specialist that lets you sort of create your own class with perks and skills from all the others. But for the main 5, you've got your Special Killers, your Horde Cleaners, and your Team Supports. Each of the classes feel like they have their own unique strengths and weaknesses, and I think each one brings something valuable, even though some of them are definitely stronger than others. Outside of their unique abilities, they also have a ton of different weapons for you to unlock that offer a good amount of build variety in a very similar fashion to something like Helldivers 2. And, like Helldivers, most of the weapons are available to everyone. Now this game launched with a surprising amount of weapons across multiple damage types, so I'm glad we can use them in any way we want. But, all of the classes except one do have their own signature weapon that only they can use if you want that bit of uniqueness. You can also put attachments on your weapons to give them unique stat buffs, like recoil, spread, or crit chance like you'd expect. There's also some unique attachments that can modify your playstyle, giving you bigger bonuses if you do things like staying crouched. Weapons even have their own intrinsic trait that modifies stats in unique ways, and once you've used a weapon enough, you can permanently access that trait on all other weapons. Now, most of this is pretty standard weapon customization stuff, but I do think they've added a few interesting ideas that I hadn't seen before, and I did want to mention it. And the build depth gets even better with the perk system, this large grid with tiles that opens up more as you level up. It's essentially a Resident Evil inventory style system that lets you rotate and slot in perks to fit your build. Each of the classes have a ton of options you can unlock, and if you get high enough, you can even use perks from other classes in your build. And the last piece of the build crafting pie comes from augments and challenge cards, which are purchasable items from the armory. You can apply challenge cards at the start of each mission that add positive, neutral, or negative modifiers for a run, giving you the appropriate reward multiplier. Each member of the team can bring their own card, and there's actually a pretty good amount of variety between them. And as for the augments, these are attachments for your weapons that drastically alter how they operate. If you've ever played Deep Rock Galactic, this is basically the overclock system directly adapted. You've got stable augments that give flat buffs with no downsides, unstable augments that give stronger buffs with some sort of trade-off, and volatile augments that instead of giving a buff, just fundamentally change how the weapon operates, like changing your heat weapons to apply a burn over time, or making each individual shot randomly deal between 50% or 250% damage. Honestly, the build crafting in this game is actually pretty solid. Now I am going to go over a lot of issues I have, but I do think it's important to recognize what they did well too. So, credit where credit's due, this is pretty good. Another point of praise I have for the game is they've added plenty of map variety to use those builds in. The game launched with 14 missions, 15 if you count the isolated boss fight, each with a different combination of 3 enemy factions. Now, I do not love all these factions, but we'll get into that later. The point is that there's different playstyles and damage types that shine against each one, so you're encouraged to have multiple loadouts as you progress into the higher difficulties. And across 15 different missions, that's a lot of replayability. And these are good looking levels too. It's more like Space Marines 2 Railroad style levels as opposed to something like Helldivers where you just run around an open map, but they've captured the alien aesthetic really well. They look good and they're fun to look at while you play. At first. If there's anything that makes me not want to run through these levels on repeat, it's the dialogue.
up. We're smart.
Oh man, the dialogue. For starters, the Marines have like 10 voice lines that they rotate between.
Anytime, anywhere.
Bag 'em and tag 'em. I am the ultimate badass.
Nowhere near enough. You're going to be hearing the same lines in the same cadence over and over again for your entire time playing this game. And the dialogue is bad.
So that's how it's done. You pew-pewed those Xenos like it was nothing.
If I have to hear "I am the ultimate badass" one more time,
I am the ultimate badass. I am the ultimate badass. I am the ultimate badass. I am the ultimate Oh!
and that's just the combat dialogue. Don't get me started on the actual story, both in the missions and between them.
These bugs are thick. You holding up?
The setup of the game is that you join a massive spaceship so that you can rescue missing members of the crew, and from there, you track down a mad scientist lady performing experiments on xenomorphs. That's fine, but the dialogue sounds like it's written by AI or something.
Wackadoodle is a legitimate adjective listed in the dictionary.
The game sets up like one character trait for each crew member, and that's all you hear about for the entire game.
That Acidium didn't get you, did it? I don't see any Spidey veins.
Did you know that this guy likes to tell bad jokes?
Entering the trauma ward.
Ah, yes. That's where they send people who hear my jokes.
Ooh, or how about that his jokes are bad?
Not my favorite place. The patients there never laugh at my jokes.
You'll never believe what everyone else thinks about his jokes, though.
Copy that. Heading your way, Slowco.
Meds here.
You know, like slow-mo.
Raptor!
Sorry.
Although I will say, the armory guy giving you fun facts about birds between each mission was pretty cool.
On Earth, there's a species of birds called shrikes, or butcher birds. They're metal as hell.
Even outside when the game is trying to be funny, the story is just rough. These people do not talk like Marines, let alone Marines fighting against fucking xenomorphs. We're dealing with aliens that impregnate you through your throat so that a baby can rip your chest open, and our grizzled commander talks to us like this?
I'm sorry you had to see me take
somebody's
life.
The entire game just feels too nice, if that makes sense. There's a certain atmosphere that should come with the Alien franchise. These are horrifying creatures that slaughter humans without a second thought. They demand only the most seasoned, fearless Marines to even consider fighting them. Instead, we feel like a small business going through a rough quarter.
I sound like a gossip at the office water cooler.
Now, I understand that this isn't a horror game and that they're going for a different vibe with more of a power fantasy, but it's just too far in the opposite direction for my taste. You even have to give multiple responses to multiple people after every mission, and even that dialogue is just... ugh. And as a side note, the facial animations for the NPCs are like weirdly over-animated. It reminds me of a TF2 Gmod video. And while you're listening to that ChatGPT dialogue, you've also got to endure a ton of technical issues while you play. We've got frame lag, we've got rubber banding, we've got xenomorphs moonwalking around the arena or just straight up standing still, we've got disconnects.
I am the ultimate badass.
It's also pretty unintuitive to interact with things like terminals or other players. You have to get pixel perfect if you want to do something like heal a teammate, for example, which is just frustrating. I had some sort of performance issue on essentially every level. Sometimes it was just the occasional bug or frame drop, but the further I got into the campaign, the more drastic it became, sometimes even flinging me through a doorway or dragging me backwards to get ripped apart. Now, bugs in performance can eventually be patched, and, devs willing, you can always add an option to mute story comms inside the mission. But what's not as easily solvable is some of my gripes with the combat itself. Overall, the combat is fine. It's nothing new or groundbreaking if you're familiar with the genre, but it gets the job done. Combined with so many different options to play with, I do think that there is a version here that could be pretty good, even though I do find myself missing the crunchy melee combat in other games. One of my biggest gripes, though, is that even on normal difficulty, there's no option to revive dead teammates. Now, if your health hits 0, you go down like normal, and the down timer is pretty long, but if you actually die, that's it. You're dead. You just have to sit there and watch for the rest of the mission.
skill issue.
Now, I understand that from a difficulty perspective, the consequence of death is important, but on base difficulty, even in Left 4 Dead, which came out almost 20 years ago, you get... oh, wow. That came out 20 years ago, you could find dead teammates in a closet and get them back in the game. They didn't have to just sit and watch everyone else have fun, or leave early and lose their rewards. There has gotta be a better solution than permadeath. The ultimate badass does not sit around doing nothing for 20 minutes.
I am the ultimate...
Outside of that though, I think my biggest gripe with the flow of combat is how stagnant it can feel sometimes. You essentially just hold down an area, kill, move to the next area, kill, and repeat. That's a pretty standard formula for these games, but the problem here is that that's really all that's happening. Normally, my description would be a very surface level way of looking at it, but in this game it actually just feels accurate. Looking at Helldivers 2, there's always something going on that demands your attention. An enemy spawner needs to be dealt with, a new dropship just added a huge threat, or you're being forced out of your position and you need to adapt. Here, enemies just pour out of walls non-stop. There are special enemies, and sometimes you do need to make sure that you're killing them first, but nothing requires you to adapt to how you're dealing with them. You just hold your ground and mow them down. Very little in the way of repositioning or adapting, even on harder difficulties. The map design, and even class design to an extent, encourages a very turtle playstyle that I think can get old pretty quickly. Now that's not to say the game is easy or you can't get overwhelmed. You can, and you certainly will. And it is fun to try and get out of those situations. But with how floaty the movement is and just how the maps are designed, I found that even when shit hits the fan, there isn't a lot you can do to actually change your strategy in the moment. Especially because there isn't any text chat in the game, and voice chat is currently disabled for some reason, so there isn't much to help communicate with teammates outside of a ping system. Unfortunately, a lot of the icons in the game aren't really all that intuitive. It was pretty frustrating to come across multiple buffs from teammates that I did not even remotely comprehend. The icons require you to be familiar with the class itself or something, but overall it just doesn't lend itself well to new eyes. I think you should be able to tell the difference between a reload speed buff, a damage buff, or any other kind of buff at a quick glance. Instead, I'm taken out of the moment because I'm trying to figure out what the hell this icon means. But I can forgive poor optimization, buggy gameplay, communication issues, even wonky combat flow, all of it. These things can be fixed. But some things, I just cannot forgive. Remember that awesome Jurassic Park movie where they had to fight grizzly bears? Ooh, or that Red Dead Redemption DLC where you played as a samurai? No? You don't? Well, that must be because Jurassic Park is about dinosaurs and Red Dead Redemption is about cowboys. Do you know what Aliens is about? It's about aliens.
Buzz-looking alien! Where?
Now, I'm not saying genres can't experiment or try new things. I'm an open-minded guy. But at the end of the day, I'm buying Aliens Fireteam Elite 2 to fire my elite team at some aliens. My precious baby xenomorphs that want to tear my face open and eat me. So why is such a significant portion of this game spent fighting against a faction of robots that suck to fight against? This is an entire spread of enemies, by the way, with unique specials, damage resistances, the whole deal. But instead of being a swarm of monsters that charge you like aliens, these enemies use guns and play cover. It turns a horde shooter about killing monsters into Gears of War. And I love Gears of War. But this is not Gears of War. The synths are just not fun to fight against. Not only because they aren't xenomorphs, but because they feel so jarringly different than the rest of the enemies in the entire game. They do have some specials that are frustrating to play against, but ultimately, it's just because they feel antithetical to the spirit of the game. They even added a separate faction of white xenomorphs with unique specials and damage resistances and all that stuff. Why not just keep that trend going? Or if you wanted a gunplay faction, at least make them like Predators or something. Or shit, just give a xenomorph an AK-47. That'd be cool. But I guess if they did that, we wouldn't be the ultimate badasses anymore.
I am the ultimate...
I don't know. I don't think synths as a concept are bad for the IP. I know they're an established lore thing and there's precedent from the first game, but they just feel too out of place for the combat the game is trying to pride itself on. I would go from having fun fighting xenomorphs to sadly waiting for them to come back whenever I was fighting the robots. This is a horde shooter. I should be mowing down waves of monsters and worrying about positioning, my resources, and extra objectives around the map, not playing cover and peeking for headshots on one or two enemies.
I am the ultimate badass.
When essentially a third of my playtime will be spent fighting a faction that isn't giving me the experience I wanted out of the game, that's a deal breaker. I know in theory you could remove them or at least play missions that don't have them, but realistically, that's not going to happen. These guys were in the first game and everyone seemed to love that, so maybe I'm in the minority on this? I don't know, but if I am, someone let me know. The initial reaction I had when a robot enemy showed up for the first time just sort of set a tone for the rest of the game that I never really shook off. Ultimately, I don't think that this is a horrible game. There's a lot of good stuff going on here with the build crafting and the gunplay, and I think with some patches, it could turn into a better game for sure. But at $50, the amount of bugs, and not the good ones, the rough story, the floating movement, and the somewhat surface level encounter design, I cannot in good faith recommend it. And that really sucks, man. This game seems like it was made by a passionate team who loved the Alien franchise and wanted to make a good sequel to a beloved first game. Maybe they were under pressure to get it out before a stacked end of the year with like GTA and how full September is. I don't know. But for now, I'm gonna say wait for it to go on sale. Or wait for those xenomorphs with machine guns. Then it's an instant pickup. But yeah, that's my full thoughts on Fireteam Elite 2. I really wanted to like it, but it just fell a little short for me. But if you liked the game, please let me know why in the comments below. I'd love to talk about it some more. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one.